So it's been a little while since I've made the switch to a mirrorless camera, and I'm not going to lie when I say I was a little bit skeptical at first, changing to the Canon EOS R system. But this video is going to be just a very basic general overview of what I think of the EOS R so far and my experience with it. I'll make sure once I've used the camera after a certain amount of time to do a much deeper in-depth review about what I actually think about the camera's functions and its features and the menu system, so on and so forth. But this video is just going to focus on my experience and the usability of the camera and how I feel this camera is actually much, much better than I anticipated it was going to be. Covering the basics. Reason number one being why I switched to a mirrorless camera. Reason number two being why I actually chose to move to a full frame. And number three, finally, is my selection process. And within that, I'm actually going to be detailing a few things that I think are important for first timers looking to make the switch to any camera whatsoever. You know, sort of things to consider basically. So I'm actually going to start with point number three. I'm actually going to go in reverse because I feel like it's very important to understand my selection process, to explain my selection process before even moving on to the reasons why I chose to go down a full frame route rather than a crop sensor camera. Also, within this video, I'll leave little notes on the video itself about what crop sensor means versus what full frame means. So stay tuned, watch out for those sort of little mini texts that explain things a little bit further. So the camera that I had before moving on to a mirrorless was a Canon 7D, which is, I'm filming on the Canon 7D right now because I have the mirrorless here in front of me to show all of you guys what the camera looks like. However, before I moved to the mirrorless, I was considering getting three cameras, and all three were full frame. And the three cameras were the Canon EOS R, which is the one that's right here. The second camera was the 6D Mark II, and the third camera was the 5D Mark IV. All full frame, all very, very good cameras, and all Canon top range cameras. I already had in my mind the fact that I was going to go down the mirrorless, that I was going to go down the full frame route. I just had no idea that the final decision was going to be a mirrorless camera. And I had already planned the fact that I was looking at investing in one of these three. So that was already I already knew what I was getting into with two of the cameras. However, obviously the mirrorless camera was the one that I was still a little bit edgy about. I also knew that I wanted to stick with Canon because I have been with Canon forever, so it wasn't a hard decision. Within the Canon family, obviously it was hard, but it wasn't a hard decision to the point where it was like, okay, should I consider a Sony or should I consider a Nikon camera? No, I knew for a fact I was going to stick with Canon. Also because a lot of my lenses were already Canon and I just wanted to, it was familiarity. I knew Canon is, obviously it's a very, very good make and it's very reliable. And that was one of the things that I think made me gravitate towards this brand more than others. It was reliability. I could always rely on Canon to give me a good quality product. So one of the pieces of advice that I would say to someone who's looking to actually purchase a DSLR camera or to upgrade their camera whatever the reason is to actually make a pros and cons list. And it seems really stupid and it seems really like not necessary, but actually it's the complete opposite. Making a pros and cons list when it comes down to cameras is incredibly useful. You start to see things so much more clearly, like where do these cameras succeed, where do these cameras fail, how does this camera differ from this camera, and in what areas. So a pros and cons list is actually really, really important, and it's exactly what I did with this camera and the two others, the 6D Mark II and the 5D Mark IV. I made pros and cons list, and I realized that out of the majority of the things that I was jotting down, the EOS R pretty much nailed all of the boxes, like ticked all of the boxes that I was considering, and it sometimes was even better on some of the things than the other two cameras. Also, the second thing that I did that helped me, I guess you could say, visualize what these cameras were going to be like before I even had them in front of me, was to do the most obvious thing, which everybody probably does when they want to look at buying something for the first time or swapping to something better. And that's go on YouTube and write down exactly, do I want the Canon EOS R? Do I want the Canon 6D Mark II? Pros of Canon 6D Mark II? Cons of Canon 6D Mark II? So on and so forth. And just watch as many videos from more experienced photographers who definitely have had either all three cameras in front of them or one of them at one point, to tell you their experience and their experience with usability. Because at the end of the day, you want to feel comfortable with the camera, and it's an investment piece. This thing is not a toy. This thing is an investment piece, and if you invest in it, you want to make sure that you are making the best decision possible with the best information that you have in front of you. Also, one of the videos that really helped that I came across, and coincidentally, he had all three of the cameras that I was considering getting in front of him, was Frono's photo. I'll leave, it's a very long video, so please do understand that you're going to be sat down for 45 minutes watching it if you're going to watch the entire thing. But I'll leave a link in the description of this video down below so you can go and check his video out, which is fantastic. It explained the differences, the pros and cons between all three cameras that I was looking at. And you can apply that the same way that he was investigating into those three cameras. You can apply it to another three cameras that you're looking at purchasing, or another camera that you're looking at purchasing, because the way that he dived into everything, the menu setting, the camera's functionality, autofocus, manual focus, everything, it was a very good video, and it helped me a lot to understand where this thing succeeded over others. So the selection obviously ended up being them three, but on paper it was the EOS R that actually seemed to be the front runner. And it was kind of a tricky situation because I had previously tested the 6D Mark II, and I had kind of like grown to like it, and in my head it was the camera that I thought was the best option before even considering going down a mirrorless route. But in a nutshell, it wasn't a rash decision buying a mirrorless camera, because it was more of a gut decision, actually, more than anything else. I kind of felt that the 6D, like I said, on paper, it wouldn't have delivered the same things that I needed, but the mirrorless camera did, especially because I'm not just a landscape photographer. I do landscapes, I do weddings, I do family portraits, I do a variety of different things. So I had to consider the fact that I needed a camera that could support those different kinds of activities that I was going to be photographing. And that's something that I think beginners or anybody looking to swap or upgrade to a better camera is to understand why you really want to make the move, and how the camera that you want to upgrade to is going to benefit what you photograph more often. If you're interested in landscape photography and that's all you shoot and you don't do anything else, then maybe you don't need to get a mirrorless camera, because you're not going to be in a wedding in a situation where you need to use silent shutter all the time, or you're not going to be photographing families, in which case you don't want edge-to-edge autofocus display. So those are the kinds of things that you need to consider, is understand what it is that you photograph most and how the camera that you're looking at purchasing can aid that to the best of its abilities. So reason number two, not number four, number two, was of course switching to a full frame camera. And like I said before, the camera that I had before the EOS R was the 7D, and the 7D is a crop sensor camera, and it basically means that you're not going to get the best, in a nutshell, you're not going to get the best resolution possible. Full frame cameras have the best image quality, image resolution. So whatever camera I went down, if it was the 5, the 6 or the EOS R, anything at that point would have been an upgrade. So that was like number one on my list. But obviously within that, I started to narrow down where this camera succeeded over the other ones. And at the end of the day, purchasing a full frame camera, for me, it wasn't just the right time, but it was also very necessary. So finally, this of course led me as to why I wanted to buy the EOS R over the other two cameras. And believe it or not, one of the main reasons which made this camera attractive to me over the others was because of the mount that came with the camera. I bought this as a bundle, so the camera came with, it was the camera body and it was the camera mount, which is this mount right here, this ring here that attaches to the camera. And that mount is actually very important because it meant that I could use my old lenses that I would use on my Canon 7D on this one. And I could use my other lenses, my EF lenses and my EF-S lenses. So I could use two types of lenses without having to purchase R lenses, which are Canon's mirrorless lenses. And that was a huge benefit for me. So I could use all of the equipment that I had already purchased and not need to reinvest a ton of money in buying new mirrorless and buying new lenses for mirrorless cameras. Also, a really good feature about the Canon EOS R is the edge-to-edge autofocusing system. So in other cameras, what you'd have is an autofocusing system with points that would span a certain area on the lens itself, on the sensor itself. Whereas on the EOS R, because this thing doesn't have a mirror inside, the autofocusing system was basically edge to edge. So you could select anywhere, here, 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 and it would focus instantly. And it was great. It meant that I had a lot more opportunity to grab shots in focus. It meant that I could focus wherever I wanted. And yeah, I wasn't limited by certain autofocus points that were set by the camera. So I have been using this camera for a while now, and like I said, this isn't going to be a super in-depth review. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the usability. And I've recently shot a wedding with this thing. In fact, I shot nearly everything exclusively with, which is a big mistake because, I mean, I did have two cameras with me, so I was shooting with two, but I shot a lot with this camera because I obviously wanted to test what it was like, and I shot it with this and my 50mm prime lens. And the results that I got were absolutely fantastic. The autofocusing system was quick, it was sharp, I was on servo mode, and I had absolutely no problem tracking subjects. However, under low light conditions, that was a little bit of an issue. I had to really bump up my ISO, in order to get like a well exposed image. But in a nutshell, this thing performed fantastically, and I am super happy with it. One of the big surprises, one of the very big surprises, was the shutter speed on this thing. The burst fire rate is incredibly quick, and it was much faster than I assumed it was. In a regular DSLR cameras have their own shutter chambers, which is like an extra little chamber. It's what makes the camera quite heavy. It's because the DSLR cameras have the mirror inside, they also have the shutter chamber, and they have the sensor. DSLR cameras are built to be heavy. They're clunky cameras. This thing doesn't have a shutter chamber. So one of the main concerns was the fact that I wasn't going to get a very quick burst fire rate. But this thing performed incredibly well. I shot it, also did some wildlife photography with this thing just briefly, and it was fantastic. This thing shot really quick. I had no problem with it whatsoever. Again, under low light conditions, it's not the best, but irrespective of the fact, I'm very happy with how this thing has performed so far. Also, the fact that this camera has a touchscreen, screen, this here, it makes it all different. I have never used a touchscreen on a camera before, and I've never had a touchscreen camera before, because the camera that I'm recording on now, the 7D, it doesn't have touchscreen. This does, and I have to say that it's like using an iPhone. The response of the touchscreen is fantastic. It's so good. I've had no problems navigating through the menu system. I've had no problems touching the screen to set my autofocusing points. It's wicked fast. The only thing that I find useless about this camera is the touch bar. This touch bar that's like right here. It's rubbish. I mean, programmed it to do much aside from flicking through my photographs, but that's about it. I just feel like it's a bit of a waste of space. But aside from that, I can live with that being crap and the rest of the camera being good. It's not a deal breaker for me. So my experience so far with this camera is very positive, but I do want to say that it's definitely not a beginner's toy. The Canon EOS R is 100% an investment piece, and if there's any advice I'd give to anybody looking to either move to a full frame camera or to even purchase a camera for the first time, whether that is a full frame or whether it is a crop sensor, it doesn't matter, is to really understand why you want to have a camera in the first place, because even the beginner cameras can be somewhat expensive. So yeah, just understand why you want. Think about why you want to use the camera in the first place and what the camera's main purpose is going to be for. The very last thing that I think helped me when understanding why I wanted to buy this camera in the first place was to compare it to others, and I think that's the best way to figure out whether a camera is right for you. Is to really do your homework and to understand not just what the camera's purpose is going to be for, but also where the camera might fail or succeed in comparison to other cameras, because I definitely didn't think I was going to be buying an EOS R, and I bought an EOS R. So it really all depends on doing your homework and doing your homework properly. So that's the best advice I think I could give, is comparing the camera you're looking at purchasing to others. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and do watch out on my channel for a future video where I actually go in depth about the menu system and about what I really do think about the camera's functionality. But in the meantime, do consider subscribing and check out my Instagram, where I post content pretty much weekly. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. Cheers guys.